Section 1 of Married Love. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Married Love by Marie Stopes. Section 1. Preface by Dr. Jessie Murray and letter from Professor Starling. Preface by Miss Jessie Murray, MB, BS. In this little book, Dr. Marie Stopes deals with subjects which are generally regarded as too sacred for an entirely frank treatment. Some earnest and delicate minds may feel apprehensive that such frankness in details is dangerous, because the effect on prurient minds might be to give them food for their morbid fancies. It is just such a fear which has been largely responsible for the silence and mystery which have for so long been wrapped around the sacred rites of mating. The question now is, has this reticence been carried too far? Has it been carried so far that it now tends to defeat its purpose of safeguarding public morals? There are many who unhesitatingly answer such questions in the affirmative. Their intimate knowledge of human lives compels them to recognize that at least as much harm is done by silence as by speaking out. Everything depends on how the matter is presented. Those who are shocked at the publication of such a book as this, on the ground that it gives material for impure minds to sport with, need only reflect that such material is already amply provided in certain comic papers, in hosts of inferior novels, too often on the stage and film, and presented thus in coarse and demoralizing guise. It can do nothing but good to such minds to meet the facts they are already so familiar with in a totally new light. On the other hand, there are all the earnest and noble young minds who seek to know what responsibilities they are taking on themselves when they marry, and how they may best meet these responsibilities. How few of them have more than the vaguest idea on the subject. How few of them know how or where to obtain the help they desire. They recoil from the coarse and impure sources of information which are so accessible, and they hesitate to approach those they have learned to regard as virtuous and modest, realizing that from such they will receive so little actual information, and that so veiled as to be almost useless. Dr. Stopes has attempted to meet the need of such seekers, and her book will certainly be warmly welcomed by them. It is calculated to prevent many of those mistakes which wreck the happiness of countless lovers as soon as they are actually married. If it did no more than this, it would be valuable indeed. But there is an even more important aspect to be considered: the effect on the child. In all civilized lands, there is a growing sense of responsibility toward the young. The problems of their physical and mental nurture attract more and more attention day by day. Eugenists, educationists, physicians, politicians, philanthropists, and even ordinary parents discuss and ponder and discuss matters both great and small, which have a bearing on the development of the child. By common consent, the first 7 years of life are regarded as the most critical. It is during these years that the foundations of the personality to be are laid, well and truly, or otherwise. It is during these years that the deepest and most ineradicable impressions are made in the plastic constitution of the child, arresting or developing this or the other instinctive trend and fixing it, often for life. And it is during these years, above all, that the parents play the most important role in the inner history of the child's life. Not so much by anything they directly teach through verbal exhortations, warnings, or commands, as by those subtler influences which are conveyed in gesture, tone, and facial expression. The younger the child, the more it is influenced through these more primitive modes of expression, and quite as much when they are not directed toward itself, but are employed by the parents in their intimate relations with one another in the presence of their apparently unobserving child. The infant in its cot, the toddling baby by the hearth, the little child to all appearance absorbed in its picture book or toy. Is it not of the utmost importance that these earliest impressions should be of the finest nature? And should we not therefore welcome all that may help, as this book can, to make the living cradle of the next generation as full of beauty and harmony as love and mutual understanding can? The age-long conflict between lower and the higher impulses, between the primitive animal nature and the specifically human developments of an altruistic and ethical order, are fought afresh in each soul and in every marriage. We need to realize more clearly that the lower is never ought to be, eliminated, but rather subsumed by the higher. No true harmony can be hoped for so long as one factor or the other is ignored or repressed. Dr. Stopes makes some very important biological suggestions which should not be lightly dismissed. Further observation is required to establish or disprove her theory of the normal sexual cycle in women, but my own observation certainly tends to confirm it. J. M. Murray. Letter from Professor E. H. Starling, M.D., B.S., F.R.S., Professor of Physiology, University of London. University College, Gower Street, London, W.C., November 23, 1917. Dear Dr. Stopes, the need of such guidance as you give is very evident. After all, instinct in man is all insufficient to determine social behavior, and there is need of instruction in the highest of physiological functions, that of reproduction, as there is in the lower functions of eating and drinking. The only difference being that in the former, instruction can be deferred to a later age. And there is no doubt that in this case it is better to acquire knowledge by instruction than by a type of experience which is nearly always sordid and may be fraught with danger to the health of the individual and of the family. At the present time, it is of vital importance to the state that its marriages should be fruitful, in children, happiness, and efficiency, and all three are closely connected. If your book helps in securing this object, your trouble will not have been in vain. Believe me, yours very truly, Ernest H. Starling. End of section 1.
Section 2 of Married Love. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Elizabeth Klett. Married Love by Mari Stopes. Section 2. Author's Preface. More than ever today are happy homes needed. It is my hope that this book may serve the state by adding to their numbers. Its object is to increase the joys of marriage and to show how much sorrow may be avoided. The only secure basis for a present-day state is the welding of its units in marriage. But there is rottenness and danger at the foundations of the state if many of the marriages are unhappy. Today, particularly in the middle classes in this country, marriage is far less really happy than its surface appears. Too many who marry expecting joy are bitterly disappointed, and the demand for freedom grows, while those who cry aloud are generally unaware that it is more likely to have been their own ignorance than the marriage bond which was the origin of their unhappiness. It is never easy to make marriage a lovely thing, and it is an achievement beyond the powers of the selfish or the mentally cowardly. Knowledge is needed, and, as things are at present, knowledge is almost unobtainable by those who are most in want of it. The problems of the sex life are infinitely complex, and for their solution urgently demand both sympathy and scientific research. I have some things to say about sex, which, so far as I am aware, have not yet been said, things which seem to be of profound importance to men and women who hope to make their marriages beautiful. This little book is less a record of a research than an attempt to present in easily understandable form the clarified and crystallized results of long and complex investigations. Its simple statements are based on a very large number of first-hand observations, on confidences from men and women of all classes and types, and on facts gleaned from wide reading. My original contributions to the age-long problems of marriage will principally be found in chapters 4, 5, and 8. The other chapters fill in what I hope is an undistorted picture of the potential beauties and realities of marriage. The whole is written simply, and for the ordinary untrained reader, though it embodies some observations which will be new even to those who have made scientific researches on the subjects of sex and human physiology. These observations I intend to supplement and publish at greater length and in more scientific language in another place. I do not now touch upon the many human variations and abnormalities which bulk so largely in most books on sex, nor do I deal with the many problems raised by incurably unhappy marriages. In the following pages I speak to those, and in spite of all our neurotic literature and plays, they are in the great majority, who are nearly normal, and who are married or about to be married, and hope, but do not know how, to make their marriages beautiful and happy. To the reticent as to the conventional, it may seem a presumption or a superfluity to speak of the details of the most complex of all our functions. They ask, is not instinct enough? The answer is no. Instinct is not enough. In every other human activity it has been realized that training, the handing on of tradition, are essential. As Dr. Saleeby once wisely pointed out, a cat knows how to manage her newborn kittens, how to bring them up and teach them. A human mother does not know how to manage her baby unless she is trained, either directly or by her own quick observation of other mothers. A cat performs her simple duties by instinct. A human mother has to be trained to fulfill her very complex one. The same is true in the subtle realm of sex. In this country, in modern times, the old traditions, the profound, primitive knowledge of the needs of both sexes, have been lost, and nothing but a muffled confusion of individual gossip disturbs a silence, shamefaced or foul. Here and there in a family of fine tradition, a youth or maiden may learn some of the mysteries of marriage, but the great majority of people in our country have no glimmering of the supreme human art, the art of love, while in books on advanced physiology and medicine, the gaps, the omissions, and even the misstatements of bare fact are amazing. In my first marriage, I paid such a terrible price for sex ignorance that I feel that knowledge gained at such a cost should be placed at the service of humanity. In this little book, average, healthy, mating creatures will find the key to the happiness which should be the portion of each. It has already guided some to happiness, and I hope it may save some others years of heartache and blind questioning in the dark. Mari Carmichael Stopes. Letter from Father Stanislaus St. John, F.C., S.J., 114 Mount Street, London, W1. December 11, 1917. Dear Dr. Stopes, I have read Married Love with deep interest. As a piece of thoughtful scientific writing, I find it admirable throughout, and it seems to me that your theme could not have been treated in more beautiful or more delicate language, or with a truer ring of sympathy for those who, through ignorance or want of thought, make shipwreck of their married happiness. Your clear exposition of the rhythmic curve of sex feeling and of the misinterpretation on the part of so many husbands of what they call their wives' contrariness, arising from their ignorance of its existence, should bring happiness to many married couples whose lives are drifting apart through want of knowledge. In the exercise of my ministry, I have repeatedly traced the beginnings of the rift to this want of knowledge and consequently of sympathy. So far, we are in complete agreement, but our ways part when you treat of birth control. You write primarily as a scientist, though a very human scientist, and so you are naturally mainly occupied with the facts and conditions of what I may call our earth life. I, on the other hand, writing as a Catholic, regard our earth life as essentially and inseparably connected with an eternal existence which reaches out beyond the grave. I look on this life as utterly meaningless in itself, as a period which is simply and solely a means to an end, eternity, a period of which all the circumstances of pleasure and pain can only be explained and rightly used in their relation to this eternity. Let me take an illustration of my meaning the case you give of the worn-out mother of 12. The Catholic belief is that the loss of health on her part for a few years of life and the diminished vitality on the part of her later children would be a very small price indeed to pay for an endless happiness on the part of all. In our belief, then, the destruction of one spermatozoon is not the question, but the deliberate prevention of an eternally happy existence, which, in the supposition, might arise from its preservation. Holding as we do that the marriage act is the divinely ordained means by which man offers to God the opportunity of creating an immortal being, we do not believe that he may make use of this means and deliberately frustrate it of its end without doing grave wrong. You do me the honor of suggesting that I should write a foreword to your book, but any foreword from me could obviously only derive value from my position as a Catholic priest, and that position is in opposition to this part of your work. I cannot end without thanking you very sincerely for allowing me to read your book. Apart from what, as a Catholic, I object to in it, it contains so much most helpful matter that I feel sure it will bring to many a happiness in married life now wanting through the ignorance and the consequent want of sympathy which you so rightly deplore. Believe me, Dr. Stopes, yours very sincerely, S. St. John, S.J., C.F. I publish this letter with sincere thanks to Father St. John for his permission to use it. M.C.S. Reply to Father St. John, S.J. Leatherhead, December 12, 1917. Dear Father St. John, your letter wins my heart entirely by its appreciation and kindness. It is a great help and encouragement to find that we are so far in essential agreement and that you are so well disposed toward even part of my effort. But, and I wish I could say it in burning words, it is not because I am chiefly concerned with time that I wrote Chapter 9, but just because I am so acutely and so persistently conscious that I am dealing with factors of eternity. To me, today is essentially a part of my life everlasting. I cannot separate time and eternity, this world and the next, as religious people often seem able to do. To me, this body is a tool in the service of, though not completely in the control of, my immortal soul. Now it seems to me that religious people, and even in your letter I fancy I detect the same tendency, forgive me if I am wrong, are too ready to separate this world and the next, to act unreasonably or cruelly here, and to trust to eternity, or the hereafter, to put all right. I do not think that this is the way God wills us to work out his plans now that he is giving us the knowledge to do better. Could there be anything more unreasonable or cruel than to bring into life half a dozen children doomed from birth to ill health, poverty, and almost inevitable crime? Christ forgave the thief upon the cross, but he said, "Woe unto him through whom offenses come. It were better for him that a millstone were hanged about his neck, and he cast into the sea." Would Christ approve of deliberately creating a thief by bringing forth a child who was won inevitably through predictable weakness of physique and mentality and an environment of poverty? Thief stands for criminals in general. But more, what about others, born dead, born imbecile, thwarted of life by miscarriage, which tear and rend the overburdened mother so that she is forced to neglect the children she has, and her neglect turns them into thieves? The poor uneducated mother commits this crime through ignorance. It is we who know and allow her to remain in ignorance who are really responsible. Is not our withholding God-given knowledge the greatest stumbling block of offense to these little ones? And shall we not deserve the millstone round our necks? Were everyone to have all the children physiologically possible, now that infant mortality is so much reduced by science, in a few centuries there would not be standing room on the earth, and nowhere for a blade of grass or an ear of corn to grow between the crowding feet. Is then a Roman Catholic mother, the increases to whose large family get punier and punier, to be privileged to go deliberately with that host of puny children at the expense of others, not only through that part of eternity called time, but through all eternity? But, dear Father St. John, it is not my place to preach or to argue with you, especially after your generous kindness and appreciation. And alas, I fully realize that even were I granted the tongues of men and of angels, and I converted you to my thought in this matter, you as a Roman Catholic priest could not uphold a position in opposition to your church. Oh, that the churches would look to Christ's own words instead of to the official church interpretation of them. I thank you very sincerely for your kindness to a stranger, and remain always yours respectfully, Mari Carmichael Stopes. End of section 2. Section 3 of Married Love. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Elizabeth Klett. Married Love by Mari Stopes. Chapter 1. The Heart's Desire. She gave him comprehension of the meaning of love, a word in many mouths, not often explained. With her, wound in his idea of her, he perceived it to signify a new start in our existence, a finer shoot of the tree stoutly planted in good gross earth, the senses running their live sap, and the minds companioned, and the spirits made one by the whole-natured conjunction. In sooth, a happy prospect for the sons and daughters of earth, divinely indicating more than happiness, the speeding of us, compact of what we are, between the ascetic rocks and the sensual whirlpools, to the creation of certain nobler races, now very dimly imagined. George Meredith's Diana of the Crossways, Chapter 37. Every heart desires a mate. For some reason beyond our comprehension, nature has so created us that we are incomplete in ourselves. Neither man nor woman singly can know the joy of the performance of all the human functions. Neither man nor woman singly can create another human being. This fact, which is expressed in our outward divergencies of form, influences and colors the whole of our lives, and there is nothing for which the innermost spirit of one and all so yearns as for a sense of union with another soul, and the perfecting of oneself which such union brings. In all young people, unless they have inherited depraved or diseased faculties, the old desire of our race springs up afresh in its pristine beauty. With the dreams and bodily changes of adolescence come to the youth and maiden the strange and powerful impulses of the racial instinct. The bodily differences of the two, now accentuated, become mystical, alluring, enchanting in their promise. Their differences unite and hold together the man and the woman, so that their bodily union is the solid nucleus of an immense fabric of interwoven strands reaching to the uttermost ends of the earth, some lighter than the filmiest cobweb, or than the softest wave of music, iridescent with the colors not only of the visible rainbow, but of all the invisible glories of the wavelengths of the soul. However much he may conceal it under assumed cynicism, worldliness, or self-seeking, the heart of every young man yearns with a great longing for the fulfillment of the beautiful dream of a lifelong union with a mate. Each heart knows instinctively that it is only a mate who can give full comprehension of all the potential greatness in the soul, and have tender laughter for all the childlike wonder that lingers so enchantingly even in the white-haired. The search for a mate is a quest for an understanding heart clothed in a body beautiful, but unlike our own. In the modern world, those who set out on high endeavors, or who consciously separate themselves from the ordinary course of social life, are comparatively few, and it is not to them that I am speaking. The great majority of our citizens, both men and women, after a time of waiting, or of exploring, or of oscillating from one attraction to another, settle down and marry. Very few are actually so cynical as to marry without the hope of happiness, while most young people, however their words may deny it, and however they may conceal their tender hopes by an assumption of cynicism, reveal that they are conscious of entering on a new and glorious state by their radiant looks and the joyous buoyancy of their actions. In the kisses and the hand-touch of the betrothed are a zest and exhilaration which stir the blood like wine. The two read poetry, listen entranced to music which echoes the songs of their pulses, and see reflected in each other's eyes the beauty of the world. In the midst of this celestial intoxication, they naturally assume that, as they are on the threshold of their lives, so too they are in but the antechamber of their experience of spiritual unity. The more sensitive, the more romantic, and the more idealistic is the young person of either sex, the more his or her soul craves for some kindred soul with whom the whole being can unite. But all have some measure of this desire, even the most prosaic, and we know from innumerable stories of real life that the sternest man of affairs, he who may have worldly success of every sort, may yet, through the lack of a real mate, live with a sense almost as though the limbs of his soul had been amputated. Edward Carpenter has beautifully voiced this longing. That there should exist one other person in the world towards whom all openness of interchange should establish itself, from whom there should be no concealment, whose body should be as dear to one in every part as one's own, with whom there should be no sense of mine or thine in property or possession, into whose mind one's thoughts should naturally flow, as it were to know themselves and to receive a new illumination, and between whom and one's self there should be a spontaneous rebound of sympathy in all the joys and sorrows and experiences of life. Such is perhaps one of the dearest wishes of the soul. From Love's Coming of Age. It may chance that someone into whose hands this book falls may protest that he or she has never felt the fundamental yearning to form part of that trinity which alone is the perfect expression of humanity. If that is so, it is possible that all unconsciously he may be suffering from a real malady, sex anesthesia. This is the name given to an inherent coldness, which, while it lacks the usual human impulse of tenderness, is generally quite unconscious of its lack. It may even be that the reader's departure from the ordinary ranks of mankind is still more fundamental, in which case, instead of sitting in judgment on the majority, he will do well to read some such book as The Sexual Question, English translation 1908, by the famous Professor Auguste Forel, in order that his own nature may be made known to him. He may then discover to which type of our widely various humanity he belongs. He need not read my book, for it is written about, and it is written for, ordinary men and women who, feeling themselves incomplete, yearn for a union that will have the power not to only make a fuller and richer thing of their own lives, but which will place them in a position to use their sacred trust as creators of lives to come. It has happened many times in human history that individuals have not only been able to conquer this natural craving for a mate, but have set up celibacy as a higher ideal. In its most beautiful expression and sublimest manifestations, the celibate ideal has proclaimed world-wide love in place of the narrower human love of home and children. Many saints and sages, reformers and dogmatists have modeled their lives on this ideal. But such individuals cannot be taken as the standard of the race, for they are out of its main current. They are branches which may flower, but never fruit in a bodily form. In this world our spirits not only permeate matter, but find their only expression through its medium. So long as we are human, we must have bodies, and bodies obey chemical and physiological as well as spiritual laws. If our race as a whole set out to pursue an ideal which must ultimately eliminate bodies altogether, it is clear that very soon we should find the conditions of our environment so altered that we can no longer speak of the human race. In the meantime, we are human. We each and all live our lives according to laws, some of which we have begun to understand, many of which are completely hidden from us. The most complete human being is he or she who consciously or unconsciously obeys the profound physical laws of our being in such a way that the spirit receives as much help and as little hindrance from the body as possible. A mind and spirit finds its fullest expression thwarted by the misuse, neglect, or gross abuse of the body in which it dwells. By the ignorant or self-indulgent breaking of fundamental laws, endless harmonies are dislocated. The modern, small-minded ascetic endeavors to grow spiritually by destroying his physical instincts instead of by using them. But I would proclaim that we are set in the world so to mold matter that it may express our spirits, that it is presumption to profess to fight the immemorial laws of our physical being, and that he who does so loses unconsciously the finest flux in which wondrous new creations take their rise. To use a homely simile, one might compare two human beings to two bodies charged with electricity of different potentials. Isolated from each other, the electric forces within them are invisible, but if they come into the right juxtaposition, the force is transmuted, and a spark, a glow of burning light arises between them. Such is love. From the body of the loved one's simple, sweetly colored flesh, which our immemorial creature instincts urge us to desire, there springs not only the wonder of a new bodily life, but also the enlargement of the horizon of human sympathy, and the glow of spiritual understanding which a solitary soul could never have attained alone. Many reading this may feel conscious that they have had physical union without such spiritual results, perhaps even without an accession of ordinary happiness. If that is so, it can only be because, consciously or unconsciously, they have broken some of the profound laws which govern the love of man and woman. Only by learning to hold a bow correctly can one draw music from a violin. Only by obedience to the laws of the lower plane can one step up to the plane above. End of section 3.